You know, I got to salute you guys. I remember when it was pretty much just you and us, and at the time Brad Wall in Saskatchewan, and it was pretty lonely. And even some fashionable conservatives like my old friend Preston Manning said, oh, a carbon tax is the way to go. You just got to suck it up. But I think the tide is reversing. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, definitely. I remember, you're right, we've been fighting the carbon tax from day one, and particularly in Ontario, people said, look, Ontario is never going to change. You've got both the Liberals and the PCs in Ontario saying that the carbon tax is the way to go, and that is a carbon tax stronghold, and you're never going to break it down. Well, how the tide has changed there in Ontario. You see now Premier Doug Ford there fighting against it, launching a court challenge against Ottawa's carbon tax. The tables have completely turned, and I think that that's just a reflection of what the people in Ontario wanted, because you had a lot of the sort of elite academic types and politicians saying, no, the carbon tax is good, and of course it does generate more revenue for government, so no surprise that politicians like it. But I think when it comes down to what voters want, it certainly, I think the tide is turning against the carbon tax.
You're so right. Well, give us the news from New Brunswick. I haven't had the pleasure of speaking yet with the new Premier Blaine Higgs, but I did have a very interesting interview with the leader of the People's Party out there, which is no relation to Maxime Bernier's party of a similar name. Libertarian, smaller government type. I mean, a little bit unusual. So I was excited when they formed a coalition to boot the Liberals. Tell us a little bit about Blaine Higgs and what's he saying about the carbon tax. I think a lot of our viewers in the West and in Ontario might not be that familiar with him.
Sure. So Blaine Higgs, the PC Premier of New Brunswick, it was definitely an interesting situation, similar to what you saw in BC, where there was a time where people weren't exactly sure who was going to form the government. So now, as you said, the Liberals have been defeated. The PCs formed government. They're being propped up by the sort of right-leaning People's Alliance. And it was a very interesting election. But now, Blaine Higgs, the PC Premier of New Brunswick, characterized the election as a referendum against the carbon tax, or a referendum on the carbon tax. He's being against the carbon tax. But to be honest with you, the New Brunswick Liberals, even their plan was to simply rename a portion of their existing gas tax, the carbon tax, and then take that revenue and put it into a climate fund, which we know is code for corporate welfare. But even that Liberal position was not even strongly in support of the federal Liberal carbon tax. And indeed, Ottawa said to the Liberal Premier at the time in New Brunswick, that plan is not going to fly. We won't accept that. Now, with PC Premier Blaine Higgs coming to the forefront here and saying, we are going to take this a step further, New Brunswick is actually now launching its own independent court challenge against Ottawa's carbon tax. So that's now the third province that is actually launching an independent court challenge against that carbon tax. So I think that's really good news for taxpayers in New Brunswick, but it's good news for taxpayers right across Canada, because the more that we fight this tax in Ottawa, I think the better.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show, weekdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Every day I do a monologue, interview a guest, and read my fan mail and my hate mail. To subscribe, go to therebel.media/shows.